Dr. Chee, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview.
Thank you.
With IQ, Inconvenient Questions. In your first party political broadcast a few days ago, you said, we don't want to be just a strong opposition. We want to be a constructive opposition to provide alternative ideas and solutions for Singapore. Now, what is your idea of the term constructive? When you say constructive opposition, I mean, there are many different versions of it, but what's your idea of constructive?
I think the whole idea behind what we're trying to put across as being a constructive opposition is just merely to tweak some of the PAP policies, because fundamentally, I think we're in a very wrong place. For example, in healthcare, the government wants to spend only so much, and no matter what you do after that, the cost is always passed on to our Singaporeans. And the government takes healthcare as a commodity that you to be sold to Singaporeans. We see it very differently. Healthcare is a human right. In that sense, we want to be able to reframe the whole idea of what being a citizen is and what being a government is, that you provide for the people. That when it comes to healthcare, provide for the people. But when it comes to business, for example, get out of the way. Let the business people, let the entrepreneurs run. But this government has got it the other topsy-turvy. They take the lead in businesses and expect Singaporeans to pay for the healthcare. So as far as we're concerned, our being constructive is to continue to tell Singaporeans what it really is, what it really should be. And that's the bigger picture. And then on the other end, come up with more concrete policies to see how we back up, how we substantiate our arguments, and then to make these proposals in its totality. That's what we think by being constructive.
Thank you. Now, there have been criticisms leveled against opposition parties in general by the PAP, and people in general do subscribe to this view that opposition parties emerge every 5 years, and as DSM Go said recently, like nomads. Now, is that really what opposition parties are about? Is that what your party is about?
Yeah.
What happens in the 5 years?
I can't say that the PAP is totally wrong on this score. I mean, if we want to be totally honest about the situation. And that is why, for us at least in the SDP, and that SDP is the only party I can speak for, is we've been very conscious of it. I've been very conscious of it. And so, if you see our record in the past decade, 2 decades, we have ensured that in between elections, we don't go to sleep. And I can only refer you to our website, because that's how that we've been on record. Otherwise, you're not going to get the mainstream media reporting what we've said and done. So if you go back and just look at what's been going on online, since 2006 even, you've seen us just constantly coming to the ground, working, doing a ground campaign, at the same time ensuring that online our presence is there. And in between, to ensure that we take the time to do our homework and come up with and draw up these policies.
But do you walk the ground?
Yes.
In the constituencies that
yes.
you are targeting to actually stand for?
Yes. Walking the ground is something that's labor intensive. We've been calling for volunteers for help, people coming up. The atmosphere in Singapore, the climate, people are tremendously afraid. And just joining us, that's people few and far in between. Whoever we can get, we take them out and we say, hey, come with us and walk blocks and house visits, on walkabouts. So these are two-pronged. As far as our ground operations are concerned, we do a walkabout that's more high visible campaign and so on. On the other hand, you sacrifice that time, the quality time that you're able to spend with the residents. That we make up for by going on a house visits. We knock on doors and people are willing to engage us. We set up meetings.
How often do you do that in the 5 years?
In 5 years we tried to do it on of course, right after elections, the frequency was not that high. So we did it on sometimes a fortnightly, monthly basis. And then in the past year or so, we've stepped it up and do it on a weekly basis. And then for the few months before that, it's been on a twice weekly basis. So we've been building it, and that's the strategy behind it.
The other criticism leveled against opposition parties in general is that all you do is poke holes in even well thought out government policies. You just throw darts at it, poke holes, snigger, but you don't come up with real alternatives. But on that score, I must admit that the SDP and the Workers' Party, for example, have come up with fairly substantive alternative policies. But even when you do come up with alternative policies, they're deemed not viable, not practicable, airy-fairy. For example, Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan recently described your economic policies, the socio-economic policies, right, as, if I may quote him, he said, they will put our country at risk. And ultimately, this will lead to bankruptcy and will lead to very big bill being passed to our children. These are not new ideas. These are ideas copied and pasted from other parts of the world which have failed. The SDP will set us on a road to Greece. Now, your policy ideas are deemed not only as patchwork, cut and paste, but that they will make us bankrupt. These are fairly serious statements. How would you respond to that?
The PAP will always criticize our policies until they start copying. And I'm not being facetious about it. I'm not being cheeky about this. They have. I'll give you one very good example. In 2011, Vivian Balakrishnan came out again and criticized us for proposing to raise taxes on the top 1% of and he said we're very middle class unfriendly. And then earlier this year, his own party, DPM, during his budget speech, proposed that they raise taxes on the top 5% of top earners in Singapore. And there have been others as well. The PSLE, for example, our school education, we've always been saying that it's a huge problem. PAP is always criticizing us for that. Until recently, even, as I said, DPM Tharman and I think it was Mr. Heng Swee Keat, Education Minister, said acknowledged there were problems. There were huge problems. It's been this almost willful part that on their part of not wanting to acknowledge the problems, or of saying almost that anything that the opposition says cannot be good and cannot be right for Singapore. We want to get past the point. We say there is common ground if we only put our minds to it.
But you're not suggesting that all these policy changes came about unilaterally because of your recommendation. No. I'm sure they have done their own health research.
Sure. But without somebody to push them. Another good example. For the longest of time, we've been talking about Singapore's healthcare. We need to move to the universal healthcare, single-payer system. That's not only us. The only last holdouts are the US. But even under Obama, you've seen Obamacare coming out and moving at least to some sort of universal healthcare system. World Health Organization has also said, look, that it's not viable if we keep going on this way. And then very reluctantly, the Medici came out and they started using these buzzwords as well, universal healthcare and so on. Look, we're not saying, we're past the point of just taking credit. Where I think where we can work together, I think to do for the good of people, we should do it. Whoever claims credit, that's immaterial. But what we want, the point that we're saying, is that without the opposition pushing the PAP in that direction, you're never going to get either that or people are going to hurt a long time before they come to realize that something is not working.
Do you believe that politics, especially during election hustings, that it has to be, by definition, adversarial?
I think being an adversarial
don't
system...
Don't give me a politically correct answer.
I will.
Tell me
I will.
what you
Yes,
truly
I will.
believe.
I honestly, the degree, the shades of it. If you ask me, the system that we see in the US, Republicans and Democrats, the first instance you get when a candidate is nominated, you have teams doing research on how you can dig out and throw mud at them. Look, this is something which I don't think is healthy at all. But at the same time, you have systems, for example, in the Western European, Scandinavian countries, where they can actually hold very civilized debate. They don't pull their punches when it comes to policies, but they don't mudsling. They don't character assassinate. And I think that's going to be good for society. no politician has ever claimed that no one can ever claim that they're perfect, right? So why go in and state the obvious? We come in with all our flaws, our strengths, our weaknesses. But at the same time, that there are views that are important to society, and that should take precedence over everything else.
Well, if you believe in this, then why did you make the statement at your rally speech, which, by the way, I think was commendable? I'd like to congratulate you. I think it connected well with the people who watched it. Why did you, in that rally speech, make a categorical statement that the economic policies of the PAP government actually resulted in a whole series of socio-economic issues and problems that we're facing today? And you referred specifically to the economic policies from 2001 to the present. Now, that's a pretty categorical statement that the PAP screwed up. That's what you said. Not in those words, but that's really what you meant.
You know, if you trace back into when some of these big issues have the hot topic of today, whether it's just the influx of foreign workers, or whether it's the income inequality, you take it back, you'll be able to trace it to just around the turn of the century, when Lee Hsien Loong was Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. And you look back, you do some research, you'll find that he actually revoked the Banking Act, specifically to make us a secrecy jurisdiction, in more common parlance, tax havens. And then you have all these, to attract all these billionaires. So you have your Eduardo Severins, your Jim Rogers, your Jet Lis, everybody bringing in their money here. When you do that, we were by proportion. We have the most number of millionaires and billionaires in the world. That can only result in one thing, and one thing only. And that's the pushing up of prices up in Singapore. Whether it's housing, your cars, your COEs, and so on. Now, on the other hand, then they embarked on this idea saying that, look, because a lot of Singaporeans are leaving, but we have to replace them. So they open up the floodgates, bring in all these foreign labor from our poorer countries, right? They come in, they are able to take on salary levels that our locals are not able to survive. So you have this double whammy right now. On the one hand, you have upward pressure on prices. On the other hand, downward pressure on wages. And that's created huge unhappiness and huge difficulties for the middle income. And this is backed up by a recent survey done by Credit Lyonnais Securities Agent. They were saying that 50%, mind you, we're talking about the middle class, 50% of Singaporeans are not able to save. They're living from paycheck to paycheck. That is not a good thing for Singapore.
I don't think any government will get all the economic policies true, because wisdom clearly is 2020 and hindsight. You must admit, even you would admit, that there have been significant changes, positive changes in the last 5 years, economic changes. I mean, DPM Tharman, Finance Minister, in his speech to the Economic Society recently, highlighted some of these fundamental shifts that have occurred. For example, you talked about middle class. He made it very clear, and I don't think he was being disingenuous when he said that. He made it very clear that for the middle class, for every dollar you pay in taxes, you get $2 back in transfers and subsidies. So this government has explained time and time again that the way they support is more targeted. The way they support is through transfers and so on, which doesn't really come very clearly in the denominator. Right? Now, similarly, in terms of Gini coefficient, which has been a major point of criticism in Singapore, the Gini coefficient, according to BPM Tharman, actually went down from 0.43 to 0.37. And he also suggested that in the Scandinavian countries, the Gini coefficient went down, was tempered even more. Right? But only because they pushed up the tax rates significantly. These were some of the factors that he highlighted that struck a chord with a lot of Singaporeans. And this is coming from BPM Tharman, who is generally seen as pretty credible person, you know. He's from your as well. So, what's your response to that? I mean, you said that all the economic policies, in terms of all the economic policies, the PAP government bungled. But some of these policies, maybe in the last 5 years, seem to be on the right track.
You know, the one thing that I've never said was that everything that the PAP does is wrong, has been wrong. Let's be very clear about it. But what we've been saying is that the fundamentals, if you don't start rethinking, no matter what you do after, it's always going to be like on a plaster on Band-Aid kind of situation. Take, for example, the idea of minimum wage. PAP will claim credit that it's moved and introduced the progressive wage model and said that, well, we've introduced saying that $1,000 minimum a month or $1,200 for certain sectors. But they haven't really looked at what goes on behind it. You don't have a fair wage commission, for example, to take employees to task if they flout this rule. I know very many people say, okay, they've given us a minimum of $1,000, but they've also extended our working hours. What we're saying is to pay them based on hourly wage. And why only certain sectors? What about the auntie and uncle working at McDonald's? They're getting paid $4, $50. In a country, in a city that outranks New York, London, Paris, Tokyo in terms of our cost of living.
So fundamentally, what do you think, what would you say is the fundamental shift in thinking?
Underlying all that policy must be the thinking, the constituency behind all the policies. And by that I mean a government, whether it has the wherewithal to be a compassionate government, to understand what its role is in society. Right now, our biggest problem with the PAP is that it sees Singapore as a corporate entity, its people as its employees, and itself as the CEOs. That must change. That must change. Its fundamental idea of what constitutes a government, what its role is so different from what the SDP has in mind. Because what we see is the government as somebody, that's an entity that serves the people and gets out of the way of businesses, and then provide the essential service that will make the people thrive and flourish. Let the people take the lead, not the ruling party, not the government.
Well, I guess that's easy. To be fair, that's easier said than done, because if you've got the responsibility of being the government, you'll have to think about the nuts and bolts of issues. While you do have the fundamental philosophical basis of policies, you also have the responsibility of actually executing some of these policies. And so, you know, the general point here is, when you are the opposition, you have the liberty, the luxury of making some of these broad statements. I'm not saying that they don't make sense, but if you are the government, surely you'll have to start thinking about the execution, the limitations, the constraints. How do we create more jobs and so on? So, is it really fair to say that this government, in fact, the term Singapore Inc. has been dropped for more than 15 years. I don't hear that anymore. I would argue that the Singapore government, the PAP, has actually become a lot more compassionate in the last maybe 10 years, 15 years, a lot more compassionate. At least they've been demonstrating. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'll give you a very simple example, and these are all what ministers said. Right? When you have, for example, Lilin Yu telling this in Parliament, Vivian Balakrishna, that even the poor, hawker centers expensive. You come up with a statement. Well, what do you want? Do you want to eat on your 3 meals at a restaurant or a food court or hawker center? It really betrays this whole attitude of the government. And then Tan Chuan Jin, I don't know why he would say something like this, right? That some of the people, elderly people, are collecting cardboard because they want to exercise. I think that there must, when you have people who are in there for too long, and then you have the Prime Minister coming up and saying that they are the natural aristocrats, that's a red flag of for a government that's been in power for too long, that thinks that somehow they are entitled to that power. That's where everything goes wrong. That's where everything goes wrong. And this is where we're saying, without an opposition right now, and at some point then be able to challenge that kind of that mode of thinking, you're going to continue down this way. There are certain people in PAP I know, they've got their head screwed on right. But the people who are in charge at this stage, we worry. We worry that they've just been completely out of touch with society.
The SDP has always maintained a stance about democracy, and that's why you're the SDP. Democracy is the basis of a lot of your policies, and in a very pure manner. Now, and that's quite laudable. SDP was constituted, founded by Mr. Chee. Now, you had taken over as Secretary General in 1997. In 1991, the general election, SDP was the leading opposition party with 3 members in parliament. But since you had taken over in 1997, until today, there's not been a single SDP member elected. Why do you think this is so? Some of the policy ideas that SDP has come up with are credible. They may not be altogether acceptable, but they're credible, right? There's a basis for some of the assumptions. Your candidates are also fairly credible. They've always been fairly credible. So despite all that, why is it that in the poll, SDP has not really done as well? There must be something. Either that or Singaporeans are dumb. What do you think is the reason for this?
2 words, visual. Social media. If you look at what's happened, and if you just chart it out together with recent history, you'll find that the SDP's has been a trending upwards uptick in terms of our support, and it wasn't and it's not a coincidence. It has come about after 2006, 2005. That's when social media came alive, Facebook, YouTube, and that allowed us really to put our views across directly en masse, reaching out to people. Meaning that before that, media information flow was very much in the hands of the government, and we hardly got any play. And so if you see how getting up there, where our candidates now are viable, people see us as a viable alternative, it really is because of the so-called advent of social media.
Well, to tell you the truth, I never liked you. My wife held a similar view. I didn't think you were trustworthy. I don't consider myself pro-PAP or pro-opposition. I belong to the large category of people who are party neutral, and we are not spectators. We are interested individuals, interested in who are elected, not just in our constituency, but in general. Many of my friends hold a similar view. And it's the view that you talked about, that caricatures you as a liar, gangster, psychopath. That's honestly the reason why I decided to do this interview. Because when I watched your first rally speech in this election, I told myself, perhaps there's something more to this man. And that's the reason why I'm doing this interview. Because I would like to find out who you are, warts and all, and the camera doesn't lie. And I'd like the people who are watching this to see you for who you are. So let me, with your permission, ask you some pointed questions. It may make you uncomfortable, you may choose not to answer them, but I'm going to ask you anyway. It has been suggested that you're not an honorable man. The allegations that you ousted the man who brought you into politics, Mr. Chee, from the party that he founded and led, often described as the doyen of opposition politics in Singapore, that you bit the hand that fed you. How would you respond to that?
That was the line that Straits Times and the TV had pushed all these years, if you look at what's come out in court during the court battle that the party had with Mr. Chee, you will see, and this is, I want to emphasize this, these are all in court documents. You can verify it and as to whether I'm telling the truth or not. The judge said there was no malice on our part. And I will tell you that when the whole thing blew up, it was in my house. And Mr. Chee tendered his resignation there and then as the Secretary General of the SDP. And this happened in 1993. I chased him, he stormed out of my house. The two of us chased him all the way to his car. And I stood there and I told him, Mr. Chee, don't do this. You still have our support. But there are certain things that we just don't agree with you, and that's part of the democratic process. We agree on certain issues, we disagree on certain issues, but it's not that we don't support you. Thereafter, for about a month,
you said we.
Yes, me and this other guy, Francis Young, and Ashley was with me as well.
But it's presented very often as a battle between Cham and Chee.
That was how the media framed it. That was how the media wanted to frame it. Before I joined the party in 1998, Wong Hong Toi, who was run then at the Workers' Party, came in on the invitation of Mr. Chee, right? And then in 1991, when two other MPs got elected, Ling Hao Dong and Chiu Chai Chen, there started the whole situation where there was a lot of bad blood already. I didn't join the party until 1990, end of 1992. And that by that time, you know, the situation, relations were strained. And again, I refer you to the court document. So I'm not making any of this up. And it got to a point whereby it was just, you know, one side accused Ling, the other accused Chiam of being a dictator within the party, and then Chiam accused them of not being loyal and so on and so forth. I didn't even take the stand because I knew very little of this. But the media kept hanging it on me, saying that I ousted Chiam. And then there was this cartoon drawn by the PAP in particular, showing me as a camel and going to the tent, and then Chiam taking care of me in the tent, and then the next picture was me kicking Chiam out. And this was something that they kept repeating, and it's gotten into the minds of people.
But the incident that triggered this entire turn of events was really your hunger strike.
Yes.
You went on a hunger strike in protest against your dismissal by NUS. Now, he felt that was extreme and not in keeping with the spirit and ethos of the party. And he, as the Secretary General, had every right to feel.
Sure. And that was the whole thing, that when they met, they all of them, including Chiam, supported what I did. And then, at some point, and I don't know when it was, Mr. Chiam changed his mind. And then the rest of the CEC said no. They stayed with me. And when you do that, you take a democratic vote. And Chiam was the only person that didn't support me. After he said that he would. And so then the whole then set the wheels chain into motion, and people then started disagreeing with him. He took that as a vote of no confidence in his leadership, and then everything started. But even when after he resigned, it's very telling, and I think that's the most important thing that you can take up from this entire episode. Justice Warren Koo, in his notes of evidence, his judgment, said that there was no malice. And he cited, there was no malice on the part of the SDP. And he cited the fact that even after Mr. Chiam defied the whole party, and that we had no choice but then to propose his dismissal, we held back that announcement. And a few of us still went to try to get in touch with him and say, look, Mr. Chiam, we don't want to do this. Is there some way that we can reconcile?
Today, are things settled?
Yes, very much so. Even a couple of years after the whole incident, when we went to visit on an official visit with our MPs to Australia, I called up Mr. Chiam. I said, Mr. Chiam would come with us. Even after he was no longer the Secretary General. And I told him, I said, if we could just get away from the war and just get to know each other again, all over again, and see how we could restart this whole process. He didn't want to. He said, I remember very clearly, he said he had an eye promoting the Inter-ASEAN Parliamentary Organization, or something of that sort. But even then, through the years, the most recent was just in August, we invited Mr. Chiam back again and said, look, we want to honor you as the founder of Secretary General.
For your anniversary.
For our anniversary. For reasons of his own, I'd like to dispute that. I think it was because of his health. Mr. had to decline, but that's fine. And through the years, I've wished him well. I just don't want, I don't see any value in us holding these kinds of grudges against each other.
The other factor, the other series of incidents that has probably contributed to the public's perception of the war is, and frankly, this bothered me as well. This whole hunger strike thing. I mean, it was Mahatma Gandhi who did the hunger strike for very, very large reasons. But in your case, because you were sacked by NUS, you went on a hunger strike. It came across somewhat dramatic. And many of the other actions, Dr. Chee, I mean, honestly, many of the other actions subsequently, defying the law and so on, appeared somewhat agitative, appeared somewhat overly dramatic. And these things, Singaporeans are not comfortable with. I believe it contributed to Singaporeans' perception of it. How would you respond to that?
Let me take you back to the times when there was no speaker's card. And I had, at that time, just taken a little microphone speaker to Raffles Place. And I just set it up over there and I said I wanted to talk to Singaporeans about our taxes, our HDB flats, our CPF at that time. And because there was just no avenue. And I just wanted to remind people again, there was an era where there was no internet. I beg your pardon, there was no social media. So the government had control of what they wanted Singaporeans to read and hear. And the only way, and I saw Singapore going in the wrong direction, and just the only way that we could actually effect any kind of communication was talking directly with them. So that's what we did. Immediately, the government made a big hue and cry about this, and this was not a Western country, and so on and so forth. But what came of that was that some people said, yes, why can't we have a freedom of speech venue? And then Goh Chok Tong started talking about it in year 2000. They put it in place. But even then, at that time, we couldn't do what we were all seeing and doing right now, and that is to have protests and so on. Because you couldn't even raise your hands and gesticulate. You couldn't even chant your slogans and so on. So there was human rights joke. And I've made that point over and over again. Without political rights, without our democratic freedoms, we cannot advance or even protect our economic well-being. So we carried on. We wanted to push for the relaxation of rules. And very soon, in 2007, 2008, they actually relaxed the rules. And then from then, activists started using it. And that was when the outcry came, when the government wanted to introduce the population white paper, pushing for 6.9 million population. And that's where the people started congregating in such numbers that I think it sent a very big message to the PAP. And that's where they started rolling the numbers.
I think the government realized that they couldn't continue with status quo on their own as well. It's a confluence of factors. Perhaps it did contribute. But the third factor, and very important factor that has affected public perception is the sense that, what kind of a Singaporean are you who goes all over the world talking bad about Singapore, primarily about Singapore government, but also it doesn't reflect very well on Singapore. It's like washing our dirty linen in the global public space. And also, I guess, when you went to Williams College, which was Mr. Goh Chok Tong's alma mater, where he was going to be honored with an honorary PhD, you went there and you protested. Now, all this doesn't augur well it didn't look good in the eyes of Singaporeans, to be very honest. I didn't appreciate it myself. So
that's how again, I come back to this point, that's how the media framed it. That I had gone over to protest Mr. Goh's award. No, I didn't. And that's a very simple fact. They invited me there. I didn't even stand up with the time that he was speaking. I was there. I was in the audience. I didn't say a single word. Right? They invited me there to talk about democracy, development of democracy in Singapore. And to me, that's always important for the people. We must distinguish, because that's what I think the state wants to do. Make sure that Singapore and the PAP are one and the same thing. I've always tried to tell Singaporeans, you must make that distinction. When we criticize the PAP, it is not the same as criticizing Singapore. That's the crucial difference, because if we conflate the two, then you're going to be in trouble all the time, as the PAP wants to frame this whole issue. One important thing, very concrete again, an example that I want to give you is this. When we were pushing for the US-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, I had gone to the US and I said no. I said that there are huge problems with this free trade agreement because it didn't take care of workers, Singaporean workers. At that time, Lee Kuan Yew said I was undermining Singapore's interests, right? When I was actually talking about protecting workers' rights here. And sure enough, when the whole agreement was signed in 2004, inequality then rose. Right? There was still no minimum wage. Workers still didn't have that kind of protection. And then we brought in foreign workers en masse. And all these things needed to be addressed. And it wasn't. But when you bring up these policies and you say, look, and when you're in Singapore, and I draw you back to the time again when there was no social media, how do you bring all these things, how do you raise all these issues up? So in order for us to be able to influence and make sure that the agreement had all these protections for our Singaporean workers, somehow you had to get into both ends, making sure at least the governments that were doing this, or the authorities that were crafting such policies, knew of the problems that our workers were facing. That was the big difference.
I will let the viewers who are watching this decide for themselves. I'm still not sure whether I agree with the approach that you're taking. But it's a question of approach. What you're saying is your intention was not to criticize Singapore, but you were critical of some of the government, the PAP
policies.
Now, let me come to perhaps the last part of this interview. In your party political broadcast, the first party political broadcast of this election, you said, and very interestingly, you said, we want to give you a reason to vote not just against the PAP, but for the SDP. Now, very poignant. What exactly did you mean by that?
You know, for the longest of time, at the outset of this interview, you had mentioned about the PAP saying that the SDP is not constructive. And all we do, and I remember, I take this to heart because I remember in my maiden campaign, and was against Mr. Chee at that time, it was in Marine Parade 1992, he had said that the opposition only moves like four stones. Well, he was not totally wrong. And I took that to heart. And since then I've said that is true. I think what at least the opposition responsibility is every time when we say that the government is not doing something right, then what should we be doing that is right? So we will come up with this whole slate of policies. They're not just policy positions and just one page kind of thing. We've actually put in a lot of effort into making sure that we think through each and every the consequences, unintended consequences, and so on. And when we present this, we want people to know that they are going to vote for something, that the opposition is credible, that the SDP is constructive, that we have the candidates who believe in something. And when we get into parliament, this is what we will work for, this is what we'll work towards. So that's the whole idea behind what we mean when we say we want people to know, to give them a reason to vote for us, not just against the PAP. In other words, when you get into the polling booth, think not say, what if we don't have SDP MPs? I think we had SDPs in parliament. Would that not be a good thing that they would bring these issues up and just at least have a debate, and so we can be more informed, so that at least the government will answer some of the questions that we've been asking for a long time. That's what we want them to do when they get the vote this time.
Throughout this interview, you've come across quite normal.
I'm glad that you think
quite normal.
No, but unfortunately, you know, a lot of people have gotten this whole idea that somehow this is
the gangster
caricature that the PAP is painting. Look, I don't know. I mean, if you've only been reading the Straits Times and so on, so from watching TV, and it's quite natural for you to think. Look, I don't want to tell people that I'm honorable, I'm good, I'm this, that. No, I've never felt the compulsion to do that. What I want people to see is see for themselves who I am. And the only way that I could do this was through social media.
So your video, a lot of people, as you know, watched the video of your family, you, very well produced, and I enjoyed watching it myself. There were some really interesting points in the video. But it also made me wonder if this was a deliberate PR effort at humanizing this villain. What is the purpose of that?
I tell you that story behind it. All right. Out of the blue, somebody called me. One of my CC members called up and said, "Hey, this guy. He helped us in the elections during 2011, and he's kind of followed what you've been doing, and he wants to do a video of you and your family." At first, I was reluctant, then because you know how in Singapore here, my life has just been sometimes home is just a bit of a sanctuary for me where I can keep things private when the PAB doesn't come in and continue to rubbish it. And my children, my wife. If I can protect my own what I do in public, then at least I want to shield from the kinds of things that the PAP does. Then she persuaded, and I said, "Look, I want to talk to my wife." And then he persuaded me. He said, "Look, people need to know the other side of you." And so, we said, then in the end we said, okay, and then he came in and he took a couple of days to do the shooting. And I left it totally in his hands. Hand on heart, I never interfered with the production and even the questions that he wanted to ask my family. The same with Martin C. when he did Singapore. I never interviewed in the process. You want to talk to me, here I am. This is who I am. You ask me for my views, I'll tell it to you. To me, authenticity is the be all and end all if you want to be the people's representative. I'm not saying that I come in with all my strengths and weaknesses. If you want somebody perfect, then I'm not your man. But if you want somebody to go into parliament, even when you not in just the good times, but even the bad times, then get me into parliament. I want to start my work, but I just don't like this whole thing about coming up with this very made up person. What you see is what you get. And I'm hoping that people can see it at least through the internet, through the social media now.
I'm glad you said this because it bothered me at certain points, wondering whether this was a PR exercise, which is not authentic, which takes away the authenticity of the electoral process for me. So I'm glad you qualify. Now let me ask you this, Dr. Chee. Why is it? What makes you do the things that you do? I mean, your life is crazy. The number of times you've gone to jail. I felt something. I felt miserable when I heard your daughter say that visiting dad in prison was normal. It should never be. But why does a person who is actually quite normal, who wants a normal life, like anyone else, choose to lead this life? Is there a hidden agenda? I mean, what is it? What is it that makes a normal person do abnormal things in life and lead an abnormal life?
You remind me of this commercial that I saw when Apple did it. You remember that? Think different. And it was Steve Jobs' idea, and he was trying to get the message across that people who want to change things think different. They do different. And if all of us are just interested in just going with the flow, keeping our heads down, and not really, ruffling any feathers, will we change? I don't know. If you ask me why am I doing it, I cannot give you an answer because that's me.
It has been suggested it's to draw attention.
Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? I don't know. when you do things like that, you pay a heavy price for it. If it's just, if it's just an ego trip, there are a lot of other things that you can do just to get yourself on high on your ego. You don't have to do things like that. But to me, it's always been this idea that, look, I don't want to be part of the system that is so fearful of speaking up for the old lady that has to push that cart just to sell cardboard, just to survive. I don't want to be part of the system where, as I said, I stand up, I teach my children. Then they have to go to school, they recite the national pledge to build a democratic society. And then here we are, everybody is so coward, so fearful. And there must be something. There must be just this one of us who's just willing to stand up. Sometimes when you watch Discovery Channel or National Geographic, you see the penguins. They're on the edge over there, and they're just waiting to take the first step and plunge into to look for food and so on after a long winter period. But then no one does. And then that one penguin then steps forward and goes, and everybody then goes along. That's what I think it was. Somebody's got to take the first step. Because if we all keep waiting, we're just all going to stand there and we're going to starve and we're going to stagnate. That's what I guess it's for better or for worse. That's what I've been trying to do.
Who is the one global political leader who's inspired you and whom you like to emulate at a deep level? If there's such a person.
When I do this look around, there isn't one person, because every person, even for example Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., they've all had the flaws. You couldn't take any one person and say that this is one person I'd like to be, because you're never going to be that person. What you want to do is to take the best of what they believe, their aspirations, what they wanted for this society, for the future.
Who are some of these people?
There's the ideals that they hold very dear to them. The two that I mentioned, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and some of the people that will come along to it, close to home, Lim Chee Siong, for example, really, really cared for the masses. And you look at somebody like Chee, gosh, that guy, all they wanted for him to do, just confess, tell us that you are a communist and we'll let you go, we'll set you free. He refused because he said that would be a lie. How many of us would do that? In not wanting to tell a lie, sacrifice 27 years of our lives in prison. There must be something in these people that somehow along the way we forgot. We get so caught up in making money, getting ahead. Don't these things matter anymore? These are things that, I don't know, you put, it doesn't make sense. If you say, would you sacrifice all this just for your beliefs? I couldn't give you a rational answer. Not if we measure in dollars and cents.
Well, I guess the difference is the four people that you mentioned, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Chin Siong, all of them were in an era where there were freedom fighters. There were freedom fighters where freedom was really scarce. It wasn't in fact, it didn't exist. But to transpose that conduct in today's Singapore, where you can't say, it's quite absurd to say we have no freedom. There is freedom. People do express. Look at this interview. We're doing this interview. There is freedom. So it may appear a little out of sync for that same modality to be transposed in today's Singapore, which could result in people feeling a little alienated by the approach that we may be adopting. Have you considered that?
No, we are talking about a situation that's now.
Yeah.
As I said, I transport you back to the time when we didn't, that internet was not as prevalent as what it is right now. And at that time, there was really no way that we could have gotten the message out. And I'm talking about the period, even as recent as, say, the 1987 arrests. You had people who were accused of things that never given a chance to defend. And then they were brought behind closed doors, and they were beaten up. Mind you, beaten up. If anybody else had done this, you would say that they were part of the triad, the mafia. Right? But this is what we're talking about, the ISD.
But today, because of changed circumstances,
and those changes
would your
came
approach
about.
be different?
The change, yeah, of course. Because right now, you've got to look at the circumstances. If you've got available to us right now the means of communicating with Singaporeans, explaining to them, persuading them, trying to convince them why you think a certain way and why that's good for society, then use it. But as I said years before, there was absolutely no, there was no Speaker's Corner, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube, there was no Twitter. So the means of communication was extremely limited. So it necessitates a different strategy. But right now, of course, what you're saying, in this day and age, sure, we will do things differently, and that's why you see the SDP doing things very differently, simply because circumstances have changed, and our strategy is follow suit.
Less agitation.
I don't think the agitation is the correct word. I wouldn't agree with that. I think what we were trying to do at that time was to educate Singaporeans and tell them of the importance of democratic rights, and we're proven to be correct as time has gone on.
Let me ask you a question that's abnormal. Can you name me three things that you find, three redeeming qualities, perhaps, or three qualities that you admire, you appreciate in the PAP?
When they started off, and I've read their history, I think they're the people at heart. When Lim Chin Siong was battling together with Lee Kuan Yew, the colonial government at that time, I think they really did it with people at heart. And then, how it is. Power is very intoxicating. And very soon, you find yourselves not wanting to relinquish power, even if it meant at the expense of the people. And so things start to change then, and that's
why.
That's very unsettling.
Are there other factors that
I think that the idea that they think that somehow or other society must be more orderly, I think there's something to that, because that really will provide the basis for society to function in a more productive manner. Right, whether it's economically, socially, and even politically. But I think order can be carried too far. Then after some time, you begin to sound and feel like a hospital, where everything is septic. But people go to the hospital to recuperate, to get well, not to flourish. That's what we need now, right? We need to flourish. We need a society that may be a little bit messier, but that's how entrepreneurs come about. Right, you tell them the do's and don'ts and just follow them. You're not going to get a very entrepreneurial society. I don't know. I'm not sure if I can think of so many things at this stage. But those are the two things.
That's fine.
But we need to build. We need to build on it. And I've made this point. We're not making the case that everything is bad about PAP. That all PAPs are bad. No, I think that we'll give credit where credit is due. But it's important that we continue to identify where we've gone wrong, where they've gone wrong, and we will make proposals how we can better the society.
Final question. This is inconvenient question, this program. What is that one inconvenient question that you'd like to pose to the electorate in this election?
There's still a very high level of fear in Singapore. Fear now of the unknown, if you will. Sometimes people tend to say, better the known than what we don't know, and it's just dark area. Do we want to go into it? I want to be able to tell Singaporeans sometimes that it's we need to. Fear will not. We cannot fly on the wings of fear, of doubt. And if we want our country, if we want our society to progress, if we want us to stop just hendak kaki, if we will just march forward, we will continue to get out of this fear. And that is why, to do our part as well, we try to paint the alternative. So that the future doesn't look as scary. That's what we can do. And that's what we take in pain to tell them. The alternative looks like this.
So what's the question you'd like to pose?
Do you want to continue to live in fear? Or do you want something that can unshackle us and really allow us to grow? Really allow us to be compassionate, and build a society that we can truly love and be proud of? Do we want that? And if you do, then go to the polls, find it, and cast it vote.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chee.
Thank you.